Figured I'd put her to work.
Call the Finance Committee to order. Alderman Payon and Alderman Arnett are present. Alderwoman Finlayson is off at LGAG and won't be here today. We have, next is approval of the agenda. We have a proposed amendment to the agenda to add GT 1019, which is another action for OEM. Is there a motion to add that to the agenda?
So moved.
I will second. All in favor indicate that the agenda with the addition of GT 1019 is approved. Aye?
Aye.
All right. Approval of the minutes.
I have had the opportunity to review these, Mr. Chair, and I would move their acceptance.
I'd second. Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. All right. Before the committee are supplemental appropriations, starting with SA 5719. And there's a couple of them here that have to do with the triathlon from Parks and Recs.
I'm by outside. 50, you're talking about 5719, correct?
Yes.
Yes, they have a $405,000 donation for the youth triathlon, and the funds have been received and deposited, and then now they need the appropriation for spending it.
Seems pretty straightforward. Is there any discussion? Failing that, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. It's always nice to get donations, no matter what their size. I think the same is 51619 for Parks and Recs.
Yes, SA 5819, it's the same thing, and next year we'll try to get them to put them all together because it's for the same event,
Right.
and they get different donations, and they've been sending these in pieces, so.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Next, we have SA 5919,
This, go ahead.
the Stanton Center,
Yeah.
another gift.
Yep, a donation for the Stanton Center for $102.13. They would like the appropriation authority so they can spend the money.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Next, we have SA 6019, and Deputy Director Dave Mendel is here. This is one of two items we have from OEM. Can you give us a short explanation, please?
Certainly will. Thank you and good morning.
You're going to enjoy this, Brad. We've got plums and air cards.
Thank you very much, Chairman Arnett and Alderman Payon. As Alderman Arnett mentioned, the first item on the agenda that we have, SA 6019, is for an additional $12,000 for the State Homeland Security Grant Program. And what that involves, as you mentioned, is a plum box. So we coordinate some of the funding for the statewide incident management team and its coordinator. And he wants to purchase a plum box, which, as I understand it, has air cards in it. So if there is a disaster and all the communication goes down and cell phones go down, and this incident management team is responding to this event, they stick this plum box connected to a generator with the air cards. They can then make phone calls, send data, and do the business of response. This would be deployed statewide, but it would be based here in Annapolis. So we could use it. We'd have the kind of
this stuff.
It's not in, that's one of the things. It's not in the description.
Yeah, all the
Okay.
details not there, but I wanted to explain. So it's broken down. It costs about $10,800 for the equipment itself. That's under equipment, as you can see. The rest of it, the $1,200, is in contract services, and what that will go towards is they estimate it'll be 2 air cards at $50 per month, which is $100 per month times 12 for a year is $1,200. That's our best guesstimate, going into the system based on talking to the representative about that. So the total is $12,000, and there's no match or no cost to the city. It's just an additional appropriation on top of our existing state Homeland Security funds.
I have no questions.
All right, is there a motion? Thank you for the explanation.
Of course.
Is there a motion?
I move that we recommend favorably on this.
Second? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It sounds good, Dave. I mean, I never would have thought about this, but thank you.
That's our business.
Yeah, I know, it is. All right, now we don't have on our agenda, but we have hard copy for GT 10-19, which again is from OEM, and it's, as I understand it, moving some funds around from one place to another, and I guess you can explain that to us.
Yes, sir. Thank you. That's correct. This does exceed the threshold of $25,000 that requires council approval, which is why, one of the reasons why it's in front of you. Keep in mind that this is all within one grant, all within FY 2017 State Homeland. What we're doing here, it's near the end of the grant cycle, and we're reshuffling based on things that have been spent. There have been a few changes. For example, I'll just start with the from line along the budget revision. The Department of Homeland Security has started reducing the areas of expenditure that are allowable. And when we sent, so like certain conferences that were previously allowable that we'd send people on under this grant, like the National Hurricane Conference, now they said, no, you can't send that anymore. So as a result,
Why?
because it doesn't have a nexus to terrorism. Doesn't have a so in previous years, the National Hurricane Conference was a obviously emergency management conference with a legitimate purpose, and now the Homeland Security and therefore MEMA is saying, sorry, you can't send people to the National Hurricane Conference anymore under this grant. So we had funds allotted for that purpose, and obviously those funds are now still sitting here because we couldn't send people, and then they changed the rules after the council previously set this account up a couple of years
So
ago.
that's Maryland. What about FEMA?
That's
Is still, if FEMA gave us money, you could use it for that, right?
it's not for the Hurricane Conference. Not for they give
Even
us
from
money.
FEMA?
No, this is all sort of connected. It's all connected from, they'll still give us disaster reimbursement. Doesn't mean we can't get all the rules are the same, but with regard to this particular grant, they're more focused than ever on terrorism. So anyway, the bottom line is they've changed some of the guidelines on this since
Right.
we set up the account. So we're just reshuffling where we're going to spend the funds.
Well, and there's nothing we can do about it, but
Yeah,
because I've become such a big fan of OEM, I'm a big fan of training as well, and it would seem to me like hurricanes are something that we are not insusceptible to.
We do have another grant that does allow this expenditure. So what we're finding is, and I think there was another budget revision that didn't require council approval on a different grant, Emergency Management Performance Grant, where we ended up increasing the training budget
Okay.
because we had to decrease it here. And so we're able to get things done. It's just a little different than we had anticipated because they changed those rules on us. Moving on to the EM radio 1806, that is the talk group that we pay for through Anne Arundel County with the OEM radio channel that we use for events and emergencies. And there was just that amount. We never know exactly what it's going to be until we get the bill. That's the extra amount left after we paid the bill, so that has to be spent elsewhere. With regard to planner salaries, we are moving that out as well. Ever since we got a drop in the 2016 grant cycle, a 40-something% drop, we've started reserving $30,000 extra in a different grant in State Homeland in salaries just as an emergency backstop. If UASI drops again or falls away, we can use the $30,000 for State Homeland just to tell our planners to find a job. You have 6 months, let's figure something out as an emergency. And luckily, we've been careful stewards. We've been obviously spending our money carefully, and the grants are still coming through. So we are planning to repurpose these funds out from planner salaries to the other three funds in combination. The first is outreach supplies. That's actually going to print some emergency operations plans that should be finalized within the next month or so. You'll hear more about that. The plan's basically done. We're going to be printing them. EOC equipment, that goes to, so Windows 7, so I don't know how much detail you want me to get into. Stop me if you'd like me to
I
stop.
think it's interesting.
So Windows 7, it's actually saving the city some money, seriously. So Windows 7 is losing IT support, not our IT, but Microsoft isn't supporting Windows 7 after January. So IT, you may hear about this from them separately. They basically have to upgrade or replace every computer in the city that runs Windows 7. And we're using grant funds to replace the computers and the phones in the EOC, so we don't have to spend city money on that purpose. IT determined that our computers, I think, are about 5 or 6 years old, and it wouldn't make any sense to upgrade them. It's just better to replace them since we're losing support on Windows 7. So what we're doing is we're repurposing those funds to put it towards the EOC, so the IT budget and the city budget, they don't have to be spent on EOC computers. We're using grants for that purpose. So it's actually a benefit in a number of ways. The rest of it, and for the $19,000 to law enforcement supplies, the plan here is to go to the mobile command. They get just enough every year from our existing grant allotment to just keep it running, to keep the services running. They have to have a satellite link and phone everything you need in a connectivity sense for the mobile command, but they haven't had any kind of upgrade. Their modem is from 2006. I mean, it's barely strung together. So we're trying to piece together just a little bit extra so they can have some better systems in the mobile command. So that's the story of this
Okay.
budget revision.
Other questions?
No questions.
Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the transfer of, how much is it? No,
We don't have a sum.
okay.
These monies,
Listed in SA 6019.
GT 10-19.
26,000 something.
Okay,
This is-
GT 10-19. I'm sorry, I was reading from the wrong script.
I second. Any further discussion?
Nope.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I do find it helpful that you were here, and I think that you would be surprised how many of the council members are interested in knowing the details. This is new stuff like plum boxes and air cards, and it's good to know about that, even if we really don't have the technical competence to understand everything. So I think that completes our agenda. Thank you for being here, and we're on to update from the Finance Department.
Thank you for your support.
Yep.
All right, as far as the Finance Department is concerned, we've been working, of course, a lot on the budget amendments, trying to get that drafted and finalized in anticipation of our meeting on Monday. I have been working on a fourth quarter transfer request, which will come to you at your next meeting. If there are any further budget adjustments that need to be made to the 19 budget to match with what's being spent, we'll bring that to you at that time. And I am busy filling the 2 open positions that I have currently, and hopefully that'll be wrapped up in the next few days.
Any good prospects?
Yes,
Good.
yes, definitely.
Katie
So-
was certainly, I think, a good find.
Mm-hmm. Very good find. So that's primarily what I've been up to. I mean,
Alright.
besides the daily work that keeps me pretty busy.
And then what did you do?
Oh, that's a burn.
Oh,
Open the oven door all the way before you try to pull something out. That's the lesson learned.
Madam City Manager, you said you had a couple of questions on the budget?
Questions on 2 of the amendments that the Finance Committee has asked for on their recommendations on the budget. So one relates to Hillman Garage, where you guys asked to increase the appropriation in FY20 by $100,000. You didn't identify a funding source. Do you want that to be bonds? Do you want that to be PAYGO, or do you want that to be the Resilience Financing Authority?
Actually, if we could take a second, I think we did that, and it was Ellie who was interested in this, but subsequently, some of us have had a meeting with Dan Nees and Diana Throws, and I'm wondering if what they're doing isn't similar to the desire for that money.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
But you guys voted.
I
You guys
know.
have a
I know.
report. We got to draw
I
up an
know.
amendment, and I don't know
So-
what funding source to use.
So I would think that if we would just give the council, and particularly Alderwoman Tierney, an update. I don't know how quickly Dan indicated that they were pretty far along on drafting 3 different RFPs,
So-
RFIs.
So when we, put the budget together, I had talked to Dan about the
Right.
timing of both the Hillman Garage and not Main Street, City Dock.
Right.
And that's why we put in the budget in the years we put it in. Since then, they did start their work. We executed that contract, I think, April 1st, sometime in April. And they're cranking on that thing. They're really moving fast. So in a subsequent meeting that Dan had with Ellie, and then in a discussion with me, they do think that they'll, have something before the end of FY 2020. So Ellie has asked for an amendment as Ellie, not as the Finance Committee.
Right.
So we have an amendment from Ellie that she's asked for, and that funding source for Ellie's amendment is the Resilience Financing Authority. But my question is, what funding source do you, the Finance Committee, us to do for your
So let me
amendment?
take a second to, and please, this was over a nice lunch at Basmati, so I may have some of it garbled, but what Dan and Diana talked about was developing, I think it's 3 different RFPs, but the one that's relevant here is to go out and get bids from people to do the Hillman Garage and whatever else in this 3P kind of an arrangement that the mayor's been talking about, which, until we know what's available and what people are willing to offer us, it's hard to know what we want to do. Ellie had talked about developing some alternatives such as replacing the garage in kind, or other kinds of things, and she basically wanted a feasibility study that would, like we did with the swimming pool, if you do it this way, this is what you're going to get, this is what it's going to cost. If you do it that way, this is what you get, this is what it costs. I think what Dan and Diana want to do is a broader approach, and will give us actually more information. We would need to consult with Ellie to make sure that she's comfortable, but I think Hillman is really a citywide resource.
I agree.
Well, and the Finance Committee recommendation was Ellie, you, and Sheila, because
Right.
you were out.
Yeah, you were up. That's why I was bringing you. I really don't know. I mean, I like the approach that Dan is taking much better. I don't know what your feeling is, but you weren't here when this was discussed.
Presented.
Right, presented. To me, the 100,000 was a placeholder just to come up with some alternatives. I would be more than happy and satisfied to recommend, since we have another action, that we, the Finance Committee or the council as a whole, take that amendment out, pending getting the information, because the Hillman Garage expenditures are in what, 2023, or, I mean, they're way out there.
It's
So
20, so it's 21 and 22.
Right, okay, so we have time. Clearly enough time, a year at least, to see where we go.
I'm sorry.
I thought it was 23 or
We
4.
had it in, the mayor's budget had it in 21 and 22. Your amendment puts 120 and leaves the same amounts in 21 and 22.
Right. So it's almost like, is it part of the money that's budgeted in the out years, or is it additional money? And is it money that's being funded by bonds, by PAYGO? It seems irrelevant if we're going to rely on the resiliency activities. So I'm not giving you an answer, I'm sorry, but my inclination would be to say we withdraw that amendment and leave the CIP the way it is and wait till we see what we get on the resiliency side of things.
Who actually filed the amendment?
The Finance Committee voted on it
As a
in their
whole.
recommendations on the budget. So the Finance Committee, I guess, can vote for a different recommendation, or you can just, we
Why
can
don't
put it
I-
out there as you have it and you can withdraw it.
Yeah,
I think that's
I'll
probably better
try
if
to-
it's already in your report, that
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
leave the
Right.
amendment in and
Right.
withdraw it.
so I'll talk to Sheila and Ellie And then we can just bring it up when we're talking about the budget on the floor and all these different amendments.
But I still have to identify the funding source in the
Right.
for the amendment.
PAYGO.
Paygo.
But PAYGO is, no, because then you have to say, PAYGO means it's coming out of the general fund, so what do you want to reduce in the general fund to cover the PAYGO? Or what revenue source do you want to increase to cover the PAYGO?
Well, cut the city manager's salary, the finance director's right behind that,
I move we adjourn.
the city council advisor.
Yeah, take it from the council salaries. That
Yeah, I
will
was just gonna say,
cover
how many of you are there at 15 each, is that it?
it. Right.
Well, there you go. That's
We
enough
don't
right
even
there,
cover
Fred.
it.
15 times 8.
That works.
Yeah.
A little bit cushion left over.
All right. Was that your motion, that it be PAYGO?
Um,
Because that's only one half of a motion. And I didn't. bring
Look,
that.
I'm really feeling pretty handicapped, not having been here for the original presentation and discussion. My gut reaction was to be honest, to defer to you on this, because you know
Right.
more than I do. We don't always agree on things, but we frequently do, and I just don't really feel like I've been educated enough to give give an opinion. I mean, I will vote on it, but
Yeah.
in terms of
I can't, I mean, I wouldn't be able to comment on where it would come from. I certainly am not going to argue we increase tax rate to cover it. I don't think it should come out of the contingency fund. I don't know if there's any reserves that we could tap, but, so, I guess I would propose, in order to give the city manager an answer, is that it come out of the bond issuance. It's 100K out of 1.4.
Well, you could make
Whatever it
it,
is.
so your choices are, as you know, PAYGO, bonds, or the Resilience Financing Authority.
Resilience Finance.
Resilience Financing Authority. If it's up and running in
Oh.
FY '20,
Will it be?
that's what Dan's saying.
Well, that sounds like an easy, let's do it out of the Resilience
There you go.
Financing Authority.
Already drafted. Okay,
Thank you.
well, you have to make a motion. I mean, you
Yes.
got to vote on that.
So
okay, make a motion that
the funding, the 100K funding for Hillman Garage feasibility study come from the Resiliency Financing Authority.
second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Do you understand what we're doing?
Somewhat.
Somewhat. Do you want any further discussion?
I don't think it'll do any good.
Okay, well, the Financing Authority is this thing we want to set up to help us across the board with all of the resiliency. And it will have monies at some point, and we have the time, so it can come out of that Resiliency Authority fund.
Yeah, well, why don't we just go ahead with that at this point?
Yeah,
And we can always,
it's just the two of us, so council will consider it as a whole.
you know, if we change our mind, we change our mind. So,
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
aye.
Ayes have it. All right, the other question was?
The other question is on Spa Road
Yes,
maintenance facility. So we have an amendment that makes it a conditional appropriation. So it'll say the appropriations for the maintenance facility capital project may be used only to construct a maintenance facility at 936 Spa Road.
right.
Okay. Constructing the maintenance facility at Spa Road means you need to appropriate an additional $916,000.
Right.
What is your funding source for that?
When does that occur?
Well, if you want to build it this
So it'll
year,
be,
coming
it'll
up,
be
it's
in,
in
it'll be in the
2020.
2020.
And you need a funding source.
Well, the resiliency fund.
I don't think so.
I guess I need to ask a couple of questions or get some information before that. I understand that the proposal that we sort of saw one-on-one for this whole swap is not the same. There's now a ball field involved, and there's now workforce housing as opposed to the so-called yuppie units. And we were going to have the mayor come and speak to the finance
And
committee.
that was the day
and
that
then
you were ill.
flub that. 'cause
Would you
I
like
got
me to go
sick.
see if someone is
be
available and the
wonderful.
document is available right now?
That would be good.
Okay, let me
'cause-
go do that, because I don't think the affordable housing piece that you just mentioned, I don't think that's correct.
Well, that's the thing. Things are flying all over.
Okay, let me go see if there's,
Thank
hold on.
you. So, I think my nose count of the council is nobody's really sure where they are on this, or even what the proposal is.
Yeah, minor
Rob
details.
and Ellie are in flux. They started off as saying, no, let's not do the land swap, but, and the county, because a part of this, I understand, is that we change Hilltop and Forest to a straight-through intersection, and the county apparently has opined on that, saying, no way, Jose. I don't know how critical that is to the latest version of the plan. I know that the people who are looking at the Forest Drive sector study are saying, not
No
on
way,
Forest Drive,
Jose.
not on Forest Drive. So, trying to work backwards, and this is one of the things that I keep asking the mayor and the city manager is this the only place in the world that the site can go? Because I'm not sure people would be opposed to the swap if the site, I also understand that the American Legion has not agreed in any way to selling this parcel. So there's so much that's iffy about it, and part of my angst on this is we've been holding up Public Works in their facility for years now, and it's continuing to,
Well, you could say we're holding it up, but that wouldn't be exactly accurate.
yeah. So, so there's so many moving parts to this that, yes.
So, Brian, can you put on the record who you are?
Yes.
My name is Brian Callahan. I live at 1130 Tyler Avenue and work in the mayor's office.
Okay.
This is the plan.
I've sent this to you guys all in the past, so you may have seen it, although there is an additional slide that is to emphasize, because the big request is about the fields, to emphasize the 3 new fields that we would get out of the project.
That's back in Maryland Hall?
Yep.
Well, I think that would be certainly palatable to a lot of people, but when you say we get it, is that gonna, the field's gonna be installed by whoever is getting the land swap?
That's above my pay grade at this point.
What's the question?
The question is,
Would-
who's putting in the 3 fields? The city or the eventual swappee or swapette?
That when we enter into the contracts to make all that happen, we'll figure all that out. It's kind of
Okay.
like who's going to maintain the marina, figure all that out,
Okay?
right? And,
Yep.
I mean, and it would require coming before you,
Right.
so you would know, you would
Right.
have, approval authority.
Okay. So is this the same number of units, and are they still the R3 lucky units?
Well, we have the MPDUs that would be included in that,
Right, how many?
whatever the requirement is. What is it, 15% or 10%?
10% over 16 units,
Yeah.
all right. And this is
So
how
it wouldn't
many
be a
units?
lot.
Right. And then what happens on the other side of the street?
That would be to be determined at a later time, and a huge potential there.
See, that's the
It's
problem I'm
not part
having.
of, it's not part of the proposal. The
Okay.
proposal is, as you head out, the left side is Spa Road.
All right.
We have a drawing there, but that's just conceptual.
The last I heard, it was an apartment complex that had some retail on the first floor and potentially facilities for the artists on the either first or second floor.
Those are just ideas that are
Okay.
being
Well,
thrown
see,
out.
that's part of the problem, is it's hard to, since this is so nebulous, it's hard to know. And then, is this the bridge?
That's not, that's a picture of a bridge.
Right. So when we talked with Tom Baum, and Sheila and I talked with Tom Baum, the initial concept was there was going to be 2 bridges, one here and one on over
Forest
Forest Drive. When we talked with Tom, he said that in the differential, there's really only enough money for this bridge and maybe some beautification of this adjacent
That's if you
parcel.
take the difference, the $2 to $3 million we're guessing that will be the difference in the swap. Yes, if you took that and just did fields or just did bridges, but this is the thing. All of the grants that we try to get, we need to put 20% down, correct? Most grants requires a percentage down, which we haven't even had the money
I've
to be
never-
able to do that.
No, I don't,
Yeah,
A match.
matching funds. I think it's 20%.
some are, some aren't.
Yeah, I never thought of it
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
So
Some have no
what we
match.
would like to do is try to take that $2 to $3 million and leverage it to get lots of grants. Grants to help us do the Poplar Trail, grants to help us do the bridges, the ball fields, which,
What about the kayaking and rowers?
at
New
Paddle Park.
boathouse.
that
New,
could-
new boathouse.
Yeah, it could
What
help with
about
that.
daycare for people in public housing?
Marinette, I think one way to look at this is that the city needs a maintenance facility,
Yes, we do.
right? We can do a maintenance facility on Spa Road, and we've got money appropriated, and we need another 900 and some thousand.
Right.
Or we can do a maintenance facility on Forest Drive, and Mr. Baum can build his development with some moderately priced dwelling units, whatever the requirement is. And because of the delta in the land values, there would also be money for to use towards ball fields, to use towards bike paths, to use towards a pedestrian bridge, et cetera. So, and I wouldn't, for this bump up in the cost of the maintenance facility, because it's been a couple years since that's been costed out. So I just look at it that way. And what that delta ends up being ultimately depends on, as this is proposed with market price units and moderately priced dwelling units. I know Alderwoman Finlayson's interested in workforce housing units. Workforce housing units makes the delta between the two land values less, right? So it ultimately, what that delta is and how far it goes, and whether it does 3 ball fields, bike paths, and a pedestrian bridge, or it just does ball fields, or it just does a bridge, or whatever the combination is, depends on the plans that ultimately get approved for that site. So that's,
So if we just did the Public Works facility here, would there be room for ball fields still?
I
Is this the Public Works
don't know
facility?
the answer to that question. There might be, but there wouldn't be money for ball fields.
That's the
Right.
Public Works facility transposed over the property on Forest
Right.
Drive.
Right. So that's-
I mean, I suspect there would, something could be done for ball fields or bike paths or something like that, but you have no funding source for it.
Yeah, we could use Project Open Space money.
We have no you can't use acquisition money for development, and we've already programmed 100% of the development money.
Okay. So, first of all, for me, and I'm only speaking for myself, I'm adamantly opposed to the Public Work facility being on Forest Drive. I mean, what part of the Forest Drive sector study and all the reaction to it have we not been hearing? So, and I also think it's unsightly, and I also think that it's going to be noisy for those nearby neighborhoods, even if they build a sound wall. So that, to me, is not a good start. I also think that the things we're getting are so nebulous. First it was 2 bridges, now it's maybe 1 bridge, maybe it's 3 ballparks. We don't really know. What we do know is we've long suffered by not having a public works facility. And it is holding up other things, like the Forest Drive, work on the Forest Drive Fire Station. So I'm having a hard time actually getting a firm sense of what this proposal is. To the extent that I understand it, I'm just speaking for me, obviously, one of 9 people. I don't think the juice is anywhere near worth the squeeze. I would just as soon start putting a public works facility in this place see what we have left over, we'll pay for it, just like we'd planned to pay for it all along, and then maybe we do fields, maybe we do a bridge. I was talking to a couple of cyclists who have, apparently the cycle lane is not, it sort of starts here, and it drops out on West Street, so this is kind of like a cycling path and jogging path from nowhere to not connected to any other things on the other end. And I'd have to go back and look at the master bicycle plan, but I'm not sure how this comports with that. So to me, there are just so many loose ends. So that's my feeling on the swap. But the question you were asking, Teresa, was how do we want to fund the increase in cost if the amendment that the Finance Committee put forth to go ahead and with the Public Works facility there. And I can only answer for myself, and I know that we're being caught on the horns of dilemma, but to me, it's appropriate, this is a long-term investment, it's appropriate to fund it with bonds. So we would need to increase our bond issuance in 2020 by the amount that's necessary to cover the new costs.
So the reason I'm so excited about this plan is because working with the mayor as he campaigned, every single place that he campaigned, he spoke about three things: the economy, the environment, and connectivity. And I see this project does all three of those things. It connects a part of our city that's divided by a 4 or 5 lane road, Forest Drive.
You're not going to get that. The county has already said it's their property, they're not considering it. Go
Not
talk to the
considering
county
what?
again. A bridge over Forest Drive.
I'm working with the
And you
Bicycle
don't
Commission on that.
And you don't have the money for that. Tom Baum told us $3.5 to $5 million. Has the price of that bridge gone down? Because there's no money for that second bridge. So a lot of us campaign on a lot of things and make a lot of promises. Connectivity does not go away with the Forest Drive facility. And I don't know what economic engine you're talking about here. Tom Baum won't make his development profits, but I personally am also not going to agree to sole sourcing this, surplusing the land and sole sourcing it. If we're going to have, this is the whole idea that Dan Nees and Diana are talking about with the resiliency. Let's go out and see what's out there. There could be another developer who could give us a better deal and might even give us workforce housing.
I would encourage you to speak to Dan about this, because he said this is exactly, this program is exactly what he's trying to do
Well,
all over the city. And so this is a great example of how he gets started on
in
it.
fact, when I had lunch with him, we did talk about this, and the nebulousness of it and the downsides of it were something that we would consider, but he said the way to find out about this is to do, he's got 3 or 4 different RFPs that he's drafting for the city to issue. I don't know whether this is one of them or not.
It is not one of them because this was already in the works and in the proposed budget.
Right.
So it's not.
Well, I've been pretty forthright with my feelings, but again, mine's only one of 8. The real question before the council is, if we move forward with the Public Works facility immediately, how do we fund it? For me, I don't see we have any alternative but bonds.
I don't think so
I
either.
think bonds are the appropriate, certainly not PAYGO. PAYGO are for repetitive annual kinds of things, and PAYGO only works when you have room in the general fund to provide PAYGO funds.
No, I don't think any of us contemplated that if this happens, that we would pay for it any other way besides
Right,
bonds in terms of long-term
right.
use. I know a lot of it will be taken care of with the exchange. There may be, somehow there might be grant money somewhere. I don't know about that, but
We have the
you
Bike
know, if
Commission.
we can't can't add $1 million of PAYGO to
Well,
this
where would you
budget, and
find it?
probably not any other budget, really.
As finance director has told us this budget is tight. I don't think there's, I've listened to people talking about cuts here and there, other colleagues on the council. I don't, one of them is the money on contract services. I talked with Director or Chief Stokes. That's for fuel and repairs. That's not extra money. It's not new kinds of expenditures. So in looking, and I've said this all along, in looking at the appropriations budget, I think it's pretty flat. I don't think there's a big story to tell there, unless we're going to start eliminating functions, which is what Alderman Finlayson always talks about. If you're going to eliminate services, then you can reduce the budget. And of course, eliminating services means eliminating people. I don't think we've done anywhere near the due diligence to think about any of those kinds of things. And in fact, the council never has done that due diligence in our entire time on the council. And we hear from constituents, oh, you should just get this.
Present company accepted, of course.
Yes, right. So I guess the motion would be that if we amend the CIP to put the Forest Drive Public Works facility, the Spa Road Public Facility at Spa Road, we need an additional 900,000? 916.
Yep.
And the motion that I would propose is that that be funded by bond issuance, so it'll go into the capital budget for 2020.
All right.
As a bond issuance.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion. Is there further discussion?
Nope. I mean, other than to say that it's not to be interpreted as an endorsement of the land swap deal, it's simply
This wouldn't-
if
yeah.
this happens, then
This
I
would
think
be
this is the
if
way we would have to
This would
finance it.
be, if the Finance Committee amendment were passed, there would not be a land swap deal, which would mean to start construction immediately, and well, it won't be immediate because we'll have to rebid the
I
contract.
think it would be within a couple of
But it
months.
would be within this fiscal year, yes. So, now, Brian, I understand the excitement, but it just is such a moving target. There's so many pieces. Do we have any kind of an agreement with the American Legion? Because the last time I heard, they were not interested in selling their property on
Well,
Forest.
out of this project, they'll get a new parking lot, a new roof,
Do they, have
and
they
a side
agreed?
park.
Because we heard from Gunny, who is the vice president, but then I heard from the president of the American Legion that Gunny did not have authority to speak for them. So there's just so many loosey-goosey things here. It's not two bridges, it's one bridge at best, or now maybe ball fields instead of a bridge. The connectivity, I am totally in support of the connectivity. I'm also in support of the mayor's initiative to acquire more green space around existing parks and make green space connected. And that's why I have some reservation about the crab proposal. I think we have plenty of work to do to see whether that actually happens. But I think that I totally subscribe to the mayor's position that that's what we ought to be using our open space money for. Help create connectivity, not just for bicycles and paths, but just of green space. To have a completely connected greenway, which is also part of the greenway plan and is consistent with the county plan. So I know you don't want to hear the things I'm saying. I would caution you to listen more fully. I'm not opposed to those things, the connectivity, the bicycle connectivity, the jogging paths, and additional green space, and those are things that I actually stood beside the mayor when he promised it at various political gatherings, and I do still totally support that. And I really do support the notion of the mayor coming to the council and laying this out more fully, but I think there's so many loose ends, and there's so many things when we don't do the public works facility, which, how long are we going to keep those people hanging with no facility, sitting on cinder blocks in their offices, and then we don't do the Forest Drive work because we've got to take care of where we're going to be doing our maintenance work. There's just so many things that have been held up. And I think there's going to be other opportunities for connectivity and bicycle lanes and paths. So, I don't know how I can be any more direct than that, and I know you're not liking what you're hearing, but
Well, I just think that it's nebulous because it's hard to do a plan until you know what you can do. And so there's that. There's also, where do you get the money to do all of these other things unless you get money to match grants? And this would unleash $2 to $3 million to go out and then maximize it with grants.
Well-
And we have the county and the County Bike Commission ready to help us with the bridge over Forest Drive. We've got Senator Cardin and Senator Van Hollen reaching out, going, how can we help you with this project? So there's lots of potential.
well, that's all information that has not gotten to the council. And so I would argue that a little bit of conversation with us could make us much better partners if we knew what was going on and what's going on in the county. But that's totally contrary. It's contrary to what the county said in their 2040 plan on anything to do with Forest Drive. They have no plans to do anything before 2040. And that's pretty explicit in their 2040 development plan. So I don't know whether one person at the county is not talking to another person, but that is not consistent with what they're saying in that development plan. So, and again, it's hard for the council to react to these things if we're not told about them. And, basically,
Well, I
Sold on
personally
it.
was there when we talked to you about all this stuff in the conference room over there, where we explained what we were working on.
that's fine. And you did. And we're all ears. We'd like to hear more details. But, we can't, without a plan, you say it's hard to do this without having the money. Well, without a plan, it's hard for us to talk about the money. Maybe it's a catch-22, but there's got to be some kind of way that these mesh together.
It's a catch-20, the way I see it is a catch-22, where there's a caveat that this could open it all up, this project,
Well, give us the information.
by unleashing $2 to $3 million.
Well, that's not the dollars I'm hearing, and I don't think those numbers are firm either. Depends upon the kind of housing that goes in there.
Yeah.
As the city manager just said, if it's more workforce housing or housing for more of a lower income, then that margin isn't there. And again, we haven't seen any hard numbers on this. We've heard discussion, you and Will, briefing Sheila and I don't know when you got briefed or by whom, but it's all very ephemeral, ethereal.
There's a bike
It's hard.
commission meeting in these chambers
Mhm.
next week,
Mm-hmm.
where the county, people from all over our county will be
Right.
here. I would encourage you to step
County
in, and if you can.
people or county, well, I'll try to if you'll send me
It's the county's bike commission.
Yeah, okay. Which is not the county government,
No.
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 So we heard from the city's kayakers and rowers too. And
Who in county government did you talk to? Let's see if we can narrow down who's talked to whom and who we should be talking to.
well, I would think you would be talking to, in terms of the Forest Drive.
Yeah, who did you
work,
talk to that said they weren't interested?
That came right out of the draft 2040 plan. And they have no, and then I went to the
Was that a
2040
draft plan under Pittman or
Yeah,
under Shue?
yeah, it just came out.
Just came out.
Yeah.
It was under Pittman.
And I went to the 2040 planning session, and there was discussion about it there as well.
So that's a
about-
draft plan that hasn't been approved by the county council?
Nope. I'm not sure it's been approved by the county executive. It's just a draft plan.
So I would think that's similar to when, like, say, the bicycle people make a recommendation and it hasn't been approved by anybody yet.
Yeah, well, the bicycle people aren't even the county, they're,
Well, I know, but I'm just saying.
yes,
you-
right.
That's not, I don't think you can say that is the county's decision if it hasn't been approved. if you
Tanya
don't even-
Esmond was appointed by Steve
Right.
Shue.
Okay,
So,
sounds like old news
Made
to
a
me.
whole new department.
All right.
And so
Well-
if you'd like to speak to them or Stuart himself,
I think the appropriate venue is to speak to the council while it's deliberating the CIP. The council at large, and I keep repeating, I'm only one of 9. I could be a distinct minority. I'm not sure that I am, but I could be, in which case it'll move forward.
All right, I
Takes
have
5.
another meeting, but thank you.
Well, thank you for coming in on short notice. All right. There was one other question I wanted, oh, yeah. Oh, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Madam City Attorney, Manager Teresa, I want to talk a little bit about all of the flurry of the bond issuance, because I'm afraid that, from what I've been hearing from colleagues, it's not being properly understood. I think that if we went to our 12%, that there's 12 or 13 million dollars of headroom. So while I agree that I don't want to issue bonds, and I agree that it has been the policy of the council to try to do pay-go when we can, I'm not sure that the argument being made that issuing 1.4 or now 2.3 million dollars of bonds puts us in dire straits in terms of our bond funding and capability. I mean, it's tightening the.
So I'm not sure what you're talking about. We have bonds.
I'm talking basically about the report we got from Tom Mason, Mason.
Davenport.
Joe Mason and the Davenport.
Right.
Which it showed the tiers. And
Right.
it showed the columns. And
Right.
it showed if we're already above the 10%, we will be in a couple of the out years. The 11% we're still below, and the 12%, and it talked about the room we had for the issuance of new bond before debt service hit.
Right.
And 1.4 or 2.3 million dollars in this year it's making us tighter, but it doesn't put us over in any way, right?
Correct.
And we also know from
And you
the,
just took it up, if your amendment passes, you
Yes.
just took it up another 916.
right, so we'd be at
But you're still within
2.3.
affordability.
And I think at the 12% target, there's 12 or 13 million.
It's 12, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Which is not a lot of money, and it really does raise some questions about all the things we have, particularly if we don't do the resiliency or can't do the resiliency stuff. I
Yeah.
think there is a concern that we're kind of backing ourselves into the corner of having to do the resiliency stuff because we don't have any other bond choice. But we have Hillman is the most immediate. I think my sense is, from listening to the discussion, we have a short-term fix for the nuisance flooding. We may have to keep having more and more pumps and bladders coming up the hill, but, and I also am worried that we haven't seen the money from FEMA, which was a good chunk of that nuisance flooding for phase 1. But I'm worried, and I'm asking for advice, I'm worried that we're overblowing the impact of a small amount of bond issuance in 2020.
So what the mayor has proposed in his budget is within our debt affordability. So I am not concerned about that. I don't think anyone is being held hostage by the Resilience Financing Authority, but the fact is that we are a small city, our resources are limited. It is going to be very difficult for us to take care of the needs we need to take care of if we continue doing business the way we've always done it.
Right,
We're just not going to get there.
right.
This mayor was elected. When he was elected, everybody already knew for years and years and years that we would need to do something about Hillman.
Yep.
And it was never in the budget. So that lack of planning in the past, that's the hand we're dealt with,
Mm-hmm.
that we have to address.
Right.
If we don't think, if the Resilience Financing Authority doesn't work, we're going to have to still look at some way to do it other
Right.
than bonds, because if we have to issue bonds for Hillman, You can just cut every other capital project, we'll have no money. Right?
I agree.
I mean, it's really that
And particularly if we
simple.
do a bigger
And I don't,
helmet.
and I will say, I get grumblings, that, that people do feel like they're being backed in the corner on the Resilience Financing Authority. It's not the mayor backing them in the corner. That garage needs to be rebuilt.
Yeah.
And if we do it with our bonds, then let's make that decision, let's do it, and let's just cut everything else, right? Or we can see if this will work. Hillman is a money generator. And it isn't, also, I want to add, it isn't wed to City Dock, the
Nope.
redevelopment of City Dock. It's wed to City Dock only in terms of timing, in that you got to do Hillman before you can do City Dock. But you could do Hillman as a standalone Resilience Financing Authority project, or a standalone public-private partnership.
Right.
Um,
We can do
So-
3 Ps and not do resiliency.
Right.
which
So I think
I
what we
would- I
need to
like
do is
Mary.
let Mr. Neese finish his work
Yes.
and see where we are. So I would say that, but, but if you are going to, you also have Alderman Savage wants to pay-go fund, and I think you had mentioned it.
I
We
would
really
dearly
need
love
to
to, if we
clarify,
could.
we also really need to clarify what amendments you want, because, as I talked about, there's a difference in road restructuring and road resurfacing, right? And we have it 50% funded with pay-go from Capital Resilience Fund,
Right.
right? Sidewalks are all bond funded. City facility improvements are bond funded. The policy says we will strive to pay-go fund. We will strive to pay-go fund when we have the resources to do it. I think in those future years, there'll be money falling to the capital reserve fund that we can use to
Right.
pay-go fund those things, but we're not gonna program that in 2023
No,
and be
I-
guessing what the fund balance is gonna be at the end of 2022, right?
I'm agreeing with everything you're saying.
So-
And not only that, because we're budgeting conservatively, we're being very conservative on revenue, and we're being, on the other side, on expenditures, I think there's a real possibility that we will have reserves, surplus, and it'll fall to the different
Right.
reserve funds.
Right, so,
Did you write that down? You
I guess
agreed
we're,
with you-
yeah,
everything you
I
said?
got it, it's recorded. We know how to find it.
Just making sure.
So, there's a couple issues. One, I've heard, no bonds next year. Well, we're gonna sell bonds next year. We have to sell bonds next year because we have to refinance the bands. So we are gonna do a bond sale,
Jody said
right?
that.
That doesn't require any appropriation maneuvers in the budget, but we are gonna sell bonds, I just want to put that on the record so you know that. Two, we do have savings from the energy project, but those savings have already been
Yeah,
accounted for in the
we've already
budget,
used them.
right? We've
Just
already
like
done
we've
that.
used the capital reserve fund.
Yep. No, it has nothing to do with capital reserve fund.
No, well, there's 2 different pots of money, I understand that, but I thought
The Honeywell
Also-
stuff is bonds or bands, Jody?
bonds. It was
Bonds. It's bonds.
Yeah, 5
And
million.
those bonds have been reprogrammed for some other project.
Right.
Okay?
And we're using
So, and then
last
I've heard
year's
all you
capital
guys, I've heard, we just don't want to bond fund roads and sidewalks and city facility improvements. So is that the amendment you want? So it's very difficult, we're having trouble understanding.
I know.
What amendments you
And
want.
that was clear at the council meeting. We're doing 2 different things now. I want to make sure that we have a realistic picture that if we do the 900,000 and the 1.4, that we need to do the funding for the capital projects in 2020. That is not in and of itself putting us over the
Correct.
hill.
That's
There's
correct.
still headroom. We get very close to our margin. I took to heart what the young lady said, formerly of one of the big rating, Moody's, that municipalities, if they have a special one-time only thing, which if Hillman's falling down on us, I think that's pretty special, urgent, one-time only, you can go above that level as long as you have a plan to get back down. The problem I'm feeling is you've got Hillman, you've got nuisance flooding. Sooner than we would like to think, I think we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do to partner with the academy for sea level rise. That's why I like the resiliency program, and that's why I like having Dan, because I've known him for a long time, and he gets that. And fact, that's a lot about what we talked about at lunches. That is
Yeah.
gonna
And
be
so I
on
think,
us.
I agree, Ross, and I think the conversation a year from now will be very different. Because by then, they
We'll
will
have
have
it.
done their work,
Right.
right? But we've moved as quickly as we can.
I know,
You know, we've got Dan on board. First, when I first came in a year ago, through the University of Maryland, they were doing the resilience financing stress test. That work got wrapped up and I think was presented to you guys in January. We executed a contract with Dan. He started with the Center for Resilience Innovation in conjunction with University of Maryland. They've started their work. I think we're moving as quickly as we can, and if we find out a year from now that none of this is gonna work,
Yeah.
then we need to really rethink what we're gonna do and how we're gonna do it. But
agree.
for now, I think Dan is
yeah.
very, very good, and I'm
I
gonna
do too.
trust him and Joanne to walk us through
She's
this
very
and get
good as
there.
well.
But it is gonna require the council to be open-minded about, and broad-minded about doing business in a different way.
Right.
Because we cannot afford to continue to doing it the way we've been doing it.
Right, and that's why I brought up the whole topic, because I can help in my conversations with colleagues. We're
We
not,
appreciate that.
we're not in, we have reasons to be concerned, but we're not in peril. We're not jammed up against a crisis yet, but we do need to be planning so that we don't get there. And I think the resiliency thing is great, and is a better way than just a sort of a 3P kind of, one-off sort of thing, because it dovetails some things. Anyway, enough. I wanted to make sure that I was understanding that clearly, and that we will have discussions with council members with that understanding.
Please do.
All right? I will.
Okay. Well, we have finance office updates. What's new with the audit of the park and recs, the rec and parks?
So I think it's Thursday, tomorrow, we have a meeting out there at 1 o'clock to kick off the audit. The
good.
audit firm's coming down. We've got a slated an hour and a half to meet with all the rec and parks people and start talking about what they're doing, how they process things. So they're getting started.
Is this going to be with balloons and?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm not sure if they're going to have balloons.
Where did all the flowers go from yesterday? They were, okay. Because they
All right.
were all over the place for the Board of Appeals hearing.
Okay,
I would accept a motion.
I move that we adjourn.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.